I'm going to start with the big statement from the judge today, telling defendant Trump, you lost, you violated the gag order, you must take the stuff down, and the worst could be yet to come.
The judge just issued a ruling on gag order violations, finding Trump in contempt.
They are threatening to throw the Republican nominee for president in jail for talking, Harris.
He was only ordered to not speak about witnesses, jurors, court personnel or their families.
He says, in part, that this was a willful violation by Donald Trump.
I could see the side of the defendant's face as he kind of watched it. He largely looked composed or even nonplussed at times.
Threatened the former president with actual jail time if he violates it again.
So that all happened today. Legally, the defendant, in this case Donald Trump, is not in control of any part of these proceedings. The judge is the individual in our government process at this point in a trial who determines both what constitutes violating the gag order and what the punishment can be if he does it again. Now, what you have here was 9 violations, primarily from online posts that were flagged by the DA and reviewed by the judge. It's $9,000. But the real threat is what was said today. If Trump continues to attack witnesses or violate the order, he could face jail time, the judge saying he just won't tolerate willful violations of the lawful orders and, if necessary, will impose a, quote, incarceratory punishment. You can tell from the root word there, incarcerate or incarceration. I have the same document. We put the quote up there for you. That's in here. That's the one part. I mean, the whole thing is much longer, and we saw the lawyers sort of scurry out of the room and review it, as you'd expect. But it's that word, incarceratory, incarceration, that got everyone's attention. And the defendant knows what that means. He heard that. And in a sign of compliance, as I mentioned, the Trump team swiftly took down past online posts that the judge deemed violated the order today. That occurred also during the morning break. Now, prosecutors called a witness from C-SPAN today to confirm that basically the videos of Trump that they showed to the jury today were valid. So the jurors could see from all of this that it was a big issue back in 2016 that Trump was facing these allegations from women and about relationships. And you have to remember, and I was thinking about this in the room watching these jurors who all looked like New Yorkers with their notes out and they're paying attention. But to the best of my ability, I can't tell you that they looked like super political junkie nerds. And I also know from watching the questioning in the voir dire that they answered a lot of things by saying, I kind of remember or I don't remember that. Because people are busy living their lives, and this is 8 years back. So if you're watching this newscast, you might remember all this, but not every juror does. And today was the first time that Donald Trump's voice was actually heard within this trial as they watched these type of videos.
I have no idea who these women are. These are lies being pushed by the media and the Clinton campaign to try and keep their grip on our country. They are all false. They're totally invented, fiction.
Every woman lied when they came forward to hurt my campaign. The events never happened, never. All of these liars will be sued after the election is over. Michael Cohen is a very talented lawyer. He's a good lawyer.
That's just some of what was played. The second to last clip there that the jurors heard is late October 16. So again, if you're just a regular citizen who's not obsessed with this stuff, you might not know that in late October 16, this was a big enough issue that it was coming up day after day that the candidate was talking about it. The Access Hollywood tape connected not only to what he said on that tape, you might remember that, but to these other things, which we now know from this very interesting, if nothing else, set of evidence in the trial was just the tip of the iceberg as they tried to keep back the other stories and allegations. So the prosecutors brought out that witness to attest to the videos, and the jurors saw that. But the key witness today, as I mentioned, was former attorney for Stormy Daniels and model Karen McDougal, Keith Davidson, who had those damning texts, who was on the other side of Cohen in these transactions. Now, that's a sketch of him you see there, but Keith Davidson also not a household name, but we've always tried to talk to everyone we can in our reporting, and if you happen to watch the news back in the day when all of this first came out, Keith Davidson was someone we spoke to right here on the beat.
The affairs happened in 2006. Michael Cohen and I first contacted each other about the matter in 2011. So at a minimum, they knew about me and about Stormy at a minimum in 2011. They knew about it in 2012 and 13 and 14. They knew about it in 2015. They knew about it when Donald Trump declared that he was a candidate.
Now, I was just looking at that there. You see him recounting how long this had all been going around and which different investigators knew about it. Now, the DA put Davidson on today. That's long before we have heard or the jury's heard from Michael Cohen. And it may be because Davidson doesn't have the kind of credibility issues that Cohen has. The bad news for Trump today was Davidson still confirmed the same key details that we know Cohen confirms because we've heard what Cohen has to say. The negotiations with the Inquirer, which had what became an obviously clear agenda of buying and burying these stories. And the jury saw this compelling text evidence I mentioned between Davidson and a top National Enquirer editor. Now, this is a rare peek into a process that even at the high levels of media and campaigns, you don't always see because it's so secretive. The lawyer tipping off the Inquirer about McDougal, the former playmate, as a blockbuster Trump story. The tabloid editor responds, "I will get you more," that's more money, "than anyone for it. You know why." Huh. Now, if it was years ago and you even got your hands on that sordid text message, you might not know why. But these two apparently did, and now the rest of us do. The National Enquirer had this very unusual deal of catching and killing stories. Now, they did it for more people than just Trump, but those other people aren't on trial in this New York courtroom. Trump is. Now, when asked what that meant, the lawyer responds, he knew the National Enquirer's publisher and Trump were longtime friends, had a business relationship. So again, we're going from that old text to this damning testimony today against Trump. And he went on to say that they wanted to close the deal quickly, that ABC was interested in the McDougal story. But remember, and I know there's a lot going on here, but remember, ABC is the kind of network that we would expect to share, to publish, to broadcast her story if they got it, because ABC is a traditional news network. Not so much the Inquirer, when they're doing what the DA says is basically the work of the Trump campaign. So the Inquirer said they would lay it on thick for McDougal, and then Davidson said, "Good, and throw in an ambassadorship for me." He said the comment was in jest, but again, it refers to something the DA wants to prove, that this whole conversation and plot and money was about Trump's candidacy. That somehow if Karen McDougal had this deal with AMI, that's the tabloid, it would help Trump's candidacy. So even a joke by text can become criminal evidence because, again, it goes to what they're saying. It props up what Cohen is saying. It confirms a lot of the testimony we've heard thus far. Trump is presumed innocent. The burden's on the prosecution, but they're trying to meet that burden by stacking up all these different people saying, duh, this was about the campaign. It wasn't about some privacy interests of Donald Trump, who's so known to jealously guard his privacy. That's not really his thing. They also tried to corroborate this alleged conspiracy and how it benefits the campaign, with the prosecutor saying, is it safe to say if you close the deal, it would benefit Trump? Davidson confirming today, yes. The Inquirer and McDougal reached an agreement of about $150,000. We also learned today, and I'll tell you, I was there watching as they went back and forth, and the jury seemed pretty interested. They said, they started out with an ask of $1 million for McDougal, which is a lot of money. And you could see all these jurors who are just people with predominantly normal jobs in New York City kind of lean in and go, you get $1 million for that? It was a detail that drew interest. Ultimately, they landed at the sum of $150K, which we did know. Davidson, the lawyer, testified that Michael Cohen was pleased with the deal. Prosecutors also discussed the Stormy Daniels deal and claimed there that it was the same motive. Take a woman who talks about this past history with Trump and the videos they showed in the morning that showed candidate Trump couldn't afford one more scandal like this and get the deal done. So Davidson confirmed the DA's argument that the Access Hollywood tape was driving all of this because Donald Trump was already looking at a very tight race, perhaps a losing race, and couldn't afford another scandal. David texted Howard, that's the Inquirer guy, Trump is effed. And Howard, who again has a boss who's trying to help Trump, said at the time, according to these texts that are now in court, wave the white flag, it's over, people. Davidson said the Inquirer then backed out. And that, with the Stormy Daniels concept, was why he then ended up negotiating directly with Cohen. Prosecutors asked, did you believe Cohen was going to be the ultimate source of the funds? And this is where, again, the sordid plot took a turn. And they're showing this all to the jury text by text today. He responded, never, never prior to the funding. And the prosecutors say, well, where did you understand the money would come from? And he replies, from Trump or some corporate affiliation thereof, basically Trump or some shell piggy bank. And then he discussed his frustration today, saying, Dylan, again, that's the Inquirer, tells me push for the cash, then tells me to call Cohen. Then when I call Cohen, he says, I'm not paying anything. And Davidson testifies, it's one more snafu. I thought Cohen was trying to kick the can down the road till after the election. Now, at this point, you may say, why did the prosecutor spend so much time on those little details? You might even say, why is the newscaster spending so much time on those details? Because they're not little details. They go to the heart of the criminal motive that the DA is trying to prove. Because if this was all just a cover-up of private stuff, then you don't really get that second crime. You don't get the felony. There's still probably business fraud. I've told you there's overwhelming evidence of business fraud, but that's a misdemeanor. If you prove, however, against the backdrop of everything I just told you they went through in one day in court, Donald Trump in October lamenting and, clapping back against these women who were making these allegations, and the Access Hollywood tape, and the money deal, and the feeling that he was hanging by a thread. And then you add to that the idea that as long as they could keep it quiet to the election, that's all they cared about. You start to say, was this private money or free press? And the press generally can do a lot of things. TMZ buys stories too. Or was it something else? Was it, as the DA alleges, a secret, off-the-books campaign crime program where Michael Cohen and the Inquirer moved a lot of money around and they didn't report it into the FEC and it wasn't fair to the other candidates in the Republican or Democratic Party and they got caught? That's what they're trying to prove today.